Welcome or welcome back. My name is Shannon, and today we are going to talk about a few books that I have been reading and finished, and some I enjoyed, some not so much. So let's just get started. We are going to start with a DNF, and I DNF'd Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews. Now, I had read this because it was part of a project of books that books that I disliked that I was rereading. I did do a video about that. And another reason why I read it was that it fit in perfectly with a January pick for the Massachusetts Center for the Book Challenge that I was doing. The prompt being read a book published in the year you were born. Flowers in the Attic was published in 1979, the year I was born. Now, this story follows four children locked in an attic by their mother and their grandmother after the children's father has passed away, so that their grandfather doesn't know about their existence. And this is so that their mother can claim her inheritance, and then she can collect her kids and they can go off into the sunset with all their money and live happy lives. Well, what is supposed to be a few days locked in this attic turns into years. I had to DNF this reread. I just couldn't do it. The reason that I had disliked it was because I had read it originally, probably in the late 80s, early 90s, when I was definitely way too young to have read this book. So I thought, well, maybe now that I'm older, I'll have a different take on it. Nope, no different take. 1980s, 1990s Shannon feels the same way in the 2000s. I just couldn't do it. And this is a horror story, and it is definitely horrible, and I just couldn't get through it. I think if I had not known what was coming, I probably would have been able to get through it. But because I knew the horrible things that were going to happen, the trauma that was going to be inflicted, I knew that I could not be in that headspace. Not now. I just couldn't. So I DNF'd this reread. I still do remember what happened in this book, so I think that's enough. Next, we have Queens in the Age of Chivalry by Alison Weir. This is actually a third book in a series about England's medieval queens. The first two books being Queens of the Conquest and then Queens of the Crusades, all by Alison Weir. This particular edition covers the Plantagenet queens of England from about 1299 to 1399. We have Marguerite of France, who was the wife of Edward I. We have Isabella of France, wife of Edward II. Philippa of Hainault, wife of Edward III. And then Anne of Bohemia and Isabella of Valois, who were two wives of Richard II. All of these women were foreign princesses for the purposes of cementing alliances, and each queen had to balance what their home country expected of them, basically promoting that country's interests, and what England expected of them. Having babies, give an heir, and just shut up and stay out of politics. None of these queens stayed out of politics. In fact, Isabella of France even deposed her husband, Edward II, and ruled England until her son, Edward III, reached majority. She was a very famous queen for toppling her husband and supposedly ruling it with her lover. Of course, being a medieval queen wasn't easy, as there was constant political strife, civil war, plague, revolts, and always the possibility of death in childbirth. I have read many of Alison Weir's books. She is my favorite historical writer, and her writing is always accessible, and she always does impeccable research. And so just another Alison Weir book in my collection that I have finished, and I'm pretty sure this means, I'll have to double check, but after reading this, I think I've read every nonfiction book that she has put out. I'll have to double check on that. Next, I read Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. This story is set in Dublin, Ireland in the, I don't know if it's the early 2000s or mid 2000s, maybe 2014-ish, I'm not entirely sure. But in the story, we are following university students, Frances and Bobby, that's Bobby with an I, who are best friends and former high school girlfriends. Frances and Bobby have one of those typical friendships where you have the one friend who is the extrovert, the performer, the show off. That would be Bobby. And then the other who is reserved, shy, introspective. That would be Frances. This story is told through the perspective of Frances as she and Bobby become friends with a married couple named Nick and Melissa. Bobby is obsessed with Melissa, and then Frances enters into a relationship with Nick. And this creates this very odd quadrangle of sex and friendship. All of the relationships are dysfunctional. Melissa and Nick are dysfunctional. Melissa and Bobby are dysfunctional. Nick and Frances, Frances, Bobby, Melissa and Frances. The whole thing is completely dysfunctional. And when I finished reading it, the first word that came to mind, and I'm not entirely sure why, was detached. I just felt detached. It was the only word that I thought of when I finished the book. And maybe it's because all four of these characters seemed detached from their lives. I didn't find anybody in this book likable. And there were some instances where I couldn't tell if Bobby was being mean in showing her insecurity. But then again, Frances was really not a good friend to Bobby either. Their friendship was really odd. But since we are seeing everything from Frances's perspective, we are watching Frances flounder through all her relationships and flounder through life. And that's not necessarily a problem. I mean, you've got young girls in their late teens, early 20s floundering through life. That's what we do. That's what happens. That didn't bother me, but for some reason, I did not like Frances, and I would not spend time with Frances in real life, and I did not enjoy spending time with her in this book. Rooney's writing is fine, but nothing out of the ordinary to indicate to me why she is such a sensation and why everybody thinks she's God's gift to writing. It was good. Don't get me wrong. This was good, and it probably is a testament to Rooney's writing that I disliked these people so much. You know, that I did not want to be in the room with any of these people. That could be a testament to her writing. But because of that, I'm probably not going to seek out any more of Rooney's books. I know that she's written Normal People and Intermezzo that everybody on BookTube is, loving and, gassing on about. I'm probably not going to read any of those books by Rooney. And I wonder if I had read this book in my 20s when I was the same age as these protagonists, if I would have liked it better. And it could just be the simple matter of I am not the target audience. A woman in my mid-40s, I've already been through that. I don't need to go through it again. It could be just as simple as that I just was not the target audience. I didn't like anybody in this book. I didn't enjoy the story, and I was so glad when it was over. Next is The Life Cycle of the Common Octopus by Emma Knight. So this is the second campus novel that I read. I'm not exactly sure how I ended up with reading two in a row, but here we are. So this is set in the early 2000s in Edinburgh, Scotland, and it starts out as being told in flashback after the narrator becomes a mother, and we are following Canadian girl Penelope as she heads to college in Scotland with her best friend Alice. I probably shouldn't call her a girl, maybe young woman. She's probably late teens if she's heading off to college for the first time. And at this time, Penelope is still mourning the divorce of her parents, which happened when she was a young teenager. And she believes the answers to what her parents are hiding and what possibly caused this divorce can be found in Scotland. She ends up reaching out to her father's old friend, Lord Eliot Lennox, who is at that time a famous author, and then the Lennox family welcomes her into their home. She is fascinated by the family, by the estate, and even by the young son that she meets and with whom she develops a relationship. You'll find that the theme of motherhood runs throughout this entire book as Penelope encounters different types of mothers and the choices that she makes. And there are also themes of love, womanhood, friendship, and family secrets. I did really enjoy this book, and I actually sped through it. I just found it really charming. However, it did have conversations with friends vibes, but better. So you've got the same story here. Lost college girl trying to navigate quasi-adulthood and making poor decisions. The two stories are very similar, but for some reason, I enjoyed spending time with Penelope, unlike Frances from Conversations with Friends. I enjoyed Penelope. I did not like Frances. I'm not exactly sure why. And then the dynamics with the friends was even kind of similar. So Penelope and Alice, who are best friends, were very similar to Frances and Bobby in the sense that one was introverted and introspective, and the other one was an extroverted show-off. So the friend dynamics were similar, the story was similar, but for whatever reason, I did not enjoy Conversations with Friends, but I really enjoyed the life cycle of the common octopus. I did not like Frances, but I liked Penelope. And I honestly have no idea why. In this book, because it was set in the early 2000s, I really enjoyed all of the early 2000s pop cultural references. So I would have been maybe a couple years older than Penelope at this time. So I was still young in my 20s at that time. So I really enjoyed all those pop culture references. And yes, you do find out what the title means, but not until nearly the end, and don't get too excited. Sorry. A couple of things I did not like about this book. This is Penelope's story. However, Knight a lot of the times switches the point of view around to other people, which I felt really wasn't needed. I actually don't mind multiple points of view, but for whatever reason, to me, it did not seem like it enhanced the story. It also tried to explore the friendship between Penn and Alice like it was also trying to be Alice's story. That did not work for me. Knight should have just stuck with Penn having Alice as an ancillary character, not also trying to make this Alice's story. There was a storyline for Alice that included an attempted rape that, to me, did not further the story, and I did not think it was needed. So, trigger warning if you cannot read books where sexual assault may occur, even if it's inferred, I recommend not reading this. And then the last thing, when Penn actually discovers the secrets of the family, of what happened to her parents, I feel like the parents got off really easy, and I'm not sure that was really realistic. In my opinion. So yeah, Life Cycle of the Common Octopus by Emma Knight. I did enjoy this and I do recommend it. And the last book we will talk about today is the Hazelbourne Ladies Motorcycle and Flying Club by Helen Simonson. And this is set in 1919. The First World War is over, and we are following Constance Haverhill as she is being pushed out of her current job managing a local estate. The men are coming back from the war, and laws are actually being put in place that will not allow women to occupy a man's job. Constance, unfortunately, has no parents or husband to support her. She does have a brother who is on the family farm, but she does not want to go back to the family farm, so she needs to find work. She doesn't want to go into service, which was the common job for young women of her time and age, and she does not want to be a governess. So she takes an interim gig as a companion for the summer to an elderly lady who is the mother of the owner of the estate that she managed. So she and this woman go to a seaside resort in a place called Hazelbourne, and Constance then uses this time to try to figure out what she's going to do with her life. As well as meeting new people and rubbing elbows with high society. She becomes friends with Poppy, who is the local baronet's daughter, and starts to kind of live a life beyond her class, including becoming the member of her wealthy friend's motorcycle club. for women. Even though this is really Constance's story, there are some other chapters narrated by others. We have Klaus, who is a German-born citizen who is a waiter at the resort, who is having a really tough time due to the high anti-German sentiment. Then there is Harris, who is Poppy's brother, who flew planes in the war, crashed, lost his leg, and now spends most of the time wishing he had died in the war. So you've got the three narrators here, and the three of them compile different genders, different classes, different nationalities that give a broader view of what the different classes, genders, and nationalities were experiencing in post-World War I Britain. At this time, post-World War I Britain is seeing women who have experienced freedom during the war. They were working, they were traveling, and they were expanding out of their social class. Wealthy young women were now seeking new opportunities, and they were excited to have a new life beyond what was expected of them as wives and mothers. And then working class women like Constance, they're desperately attempting to find a job and scrounge a living, not getting married, not having children. And then at the time, men of different classes were serving together in the war, and they're realizing that class and social position mean nothing when you are dying together in the trenches. So now they're also seeing the men coming back from war trying to learn how to live with their new reality. All of these things are happening at the same time, and all of these things you can see in this story. Social mores are changing. At least Constance and her friends think they are, but unfortunately they're not changing fast enough. And so this book actually tackles the blatant, and I do mean blatant, racism, sexism, imperialism, classism, and populism of early 20th century Britain. And I felt that it was almost as if the past, present, and future kind of collide in this book. You've got the past being the Victorian and Edwardian England colliding with the reality that the present is facing seismic changes, while also colliding with the future, the yearnings of the younger generation of what the future might bring for them. One thing that hasn't changed, unfortunately, is that the wealthy are always going to come out on top at the expense of the poor and working class. And that is specifically shown with Poppy, who is the wealthy friend of Constance and the owner of this motorcycle and flying club. So this club that Poppy put together actually employed many women. So Poppy ran a little motorcycle taxi business where she would pick people up and bring them places. And so she was employing these working class women whose husbands were either still hadn't come home yet or had died in the war. And so when the government tells her either employ men or shut down, she shuts down without a fight, which, okay, fine, the government tells you to shut down, but she does not understand the ramifications of what this does to these working class women. Poppy's going to be fine. She has a trust fund. She has money. She doesn't need this motorcycle club, and she doesn't truly understand the ramifications of what is happening. And Poppy also makes decisions that really do reflect that she has no idea how regular people live. Poppy, as a young, wealthy woman, can wear trousers. She can ride motorcycles and become friends with women who are not of her class. Constance is not of her class, and people will just wave her off as being eccentric. Constance, on the other hand, would not be able to get away with any of this. So even though this book really does tackle some pretty heavy topics, the story still managed to be lighthearted, and I really enjoyed it. It isn't the, cozy book set at the seaside type of story, but it was still very enjoyable. And there is a romance element to this book, but it's very tangential, so I would not call this a romance, just good historical fiction, in my opinion. So I really did enjoy this book, and I do recommend it. So that is all I have for you today. Have you read any of these? Let me know what you think, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much for joining, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.